Good afternoon, everybody. This is this is for those who is interested in in this issue, those who are more steadfast. We're talking about successful deals. You can learn on failures and you can learn on success. Let's try to learn something from successful stories. We have very interesting panelists today, and I think those who are familiar with this issue will be glad to listen to success stories and some very delicate things about which you will not read in mass media. We want it to be an interactive discussion. After each case, we will give an opportunity to ask questions from the floor, not more than 3. Just ask question. Do not feel shy.
I'd be happy if the panelists will talk to each other as well. Today we have Alexey Konov from Rosban Venture Capital, Kennet Kuski, Executive Director and a founding member of Blue Water Angels, Konstantin Nadenenko from Venture Investment Director of CSC Leader, Denis Cherkasov, Chief Executive Officer from Sberbank, and Anton Inshutin, Venture Partners. Let's start with our guest who came from afar and who came such a distance to tell us about a very interesting deal where Alexey Konov also took part. And I think it's quite interesting for many reasons, because it was successful first, because it showed quite high growth of the company. And let's just give the floor to the people who did it themselves. Kenneth, please.
Press the button. Oh, okay.
Oh.
No,
Okay. I apologize that I will be speaking in English. I gave a talk to the Rotterdam IEEE 20 years ago, and they had done all their sessions in German up until my presentation, and I tried to deliver it in German. 10 minutes into the talk, they asked me to convert to English. So I will stay with my, my native language. What I want to share with you today is a little bit about what is going on from maybe an American perspective, but it really ties to globalization. The deal we did involved venture money from Japan, from Russia, and from a variety of distinct channels in the United States. The company we sold was sold for $360 million, excuse me, 650 million dollars. What's a couple million when you're having fun? So I'll lead into that, but I will ask, we ended the last session with a question about Donald Trump. And I'm going to leave regime change expertise and all of that to your other leaders, not me. So we'll skip that. Is this queued up? There we go. Real quickly, I'm the founder of an angel investment network. We look very much like a private equity group. We differ largely because our members make an intention, not a permanent commitment. So when we do a capital call, we have members that have said we would like to be investing a given amount, but they have discretionary control on each investment, which means that we have to do a really stellar job in putting together the investment offering. What we have found, and when I describe this company, you'll understand more how important it is to be able to find the talent we need to bring new technology to market, regardless of nation state of origin. The technology we'll talk about, and I might as well describe it now so you get a sense of what we were dealing with. Are all of you familiar with TED Talks? I was giving a TED Talk on the lack of venture capital and seed capital for our earliest technology startups. For advanced technology, it's still very hard to sell a dream. This company took the protein, essentially the DNA from algae, embedded it in a virus, injected the virus into a blind person's eye. The virus affected the ganglion cells which connect the retina to the optical nerve and replaced the loss of rods and cones that cause a disease we call macular degeneration. Now that's hard for me to even say, but we had gene therapy taking algae. We had a virus for a delivery vector. We were infecting ganglion cells, and it's the first time that any country has approved the use of non-human genes in a human gene therapy. And the result is that we have we have now 5 humans that have been treated for total blindness that have light sensitivity. They don't have full vision, but it's a dramatic change in their life. How do you fund a deal like that? The founder of that company gave a talk right after my TED Talk and described this thing, and people grinned and laughed, and even the medical scientists we worked with didn't believe it was possible. We did, and I'm not sure why, but we set out to find partners that didn't just bring money to the market, but that brought expertise. The way we found our Russian partner, and I'll let Alexey tell more of that story, was they had knowledge of gene therapy in ophthalmology, and that's a very, very rare expertise, and if we had to go to Russia to find it, we did. We also brought in a venture group from Japan that understood it clearly. But finding subject matter experts with these new technologies will be a challenge on an ongoing basis. The last point I wanted to make about this company as a startup is that we had 1 full-time employee. It doesn't mean that we didn't have 100 people working on clinicals, on lab tests, on manufacturing of the substance, but we had 1 full-time employee, 6 contract consultants, and we drove a company that was valued at over $500 million. It means that supply chains today, on a global basis, are going to be the determining factor for successful companies. We have to be able to go and harness the world's top scientists in a very specialized niche field and apply them quickly. We have the technology to communicate. We may not have the social support and the governmental support and the regulatory support to make that happen, but that's really the essence of this story. Just a general background, I threw this in because you can probably read correctly while not necessarily understanding my language. Our team and many of the investment leaders come from the industries we're investing in. So we have a group that runs an investment pool. We use university resources where necessary. But as we bring in these other individuals, they frequently become active investors with us. So the team's doing the diligence and then doing follow-on support of those portfolio companies are usually practitioners in the field. One of the milestone breakthroughs for our selling investors into RetroSense, the company we were referencing, was we went to a hospital in our region and asked for the oncologists and ophthalmologists to help us with the diligence. And they wrote up a tremendous paper that said, yes, each of these steps looks like they could work, and there's no reason why they wouldn't integrate, why we couldn't take the protein, carry it through the virus, create a genetic change in the blind eye, and establish vision. They said, that's all plausible, and they gave me a nice report, and I was ready to run around and show it to everybody, see this can really work. The next day, the hospital's attorney called and said, you can't use our document. We don't want to be associated with giving professional advice on investments. So you can use it internally, but you can't share it with anyone else. A week later, the chief financial officer of the hospital called me and said, can we invest? And that became our best sales tool. The hospital looked at it, they won't let me tell you what they found, but they did invest, and they became one of our largest early investors. So finding our partners matters a lot. So RetroSense final asset sale was for $60 million in cash, plus another $500 million in earnouts, that if we continue to perform and deliver the production of the drug, continue with the clinical tests, we have additional payments that will total $560 million. Let me just share 5 real quick lessons and then pass on, because I think this is, we wanted to use this really as a proof of concept for what we believe is going on in the venture and the entrepreneurial ecosystem on a global basis. And that really is sort of my opening point. The team we put together didn't exist in the United States. It didn't exist in Russia, it didn't exist in Japan. We had a strategic investor, a large pharmaceutical company that is the largest ophthalmology producer of medicines in Japan on board. Every board member brought a set of talent, a set of contacts, a set of resources that allowed this very dynamic supply chain to emerge. Second point, we had extraordinary cash management, and that was a culture that the board supported all the way through the management team. So while other groups may have raised 20 million more faster than we did, they spent it faster than we did. We ended and sold the deal with the whole last round of money still in cash. There's also a new paradigm that I keep circling back to, which is this global supply chain. Supply chains matter in every industry we're working in. They have become the dominant structure of these startup companies. Any startup today we see that wants to own its production process from cradle to grave, we lose interest in very quickly. We try to say, what is your unique value proposition? And everything else gets outsourced. Why do you need a CFO? Why do you need every critical function? We test that way. And so this company has the extraordinary rates of return it does because it was so efficient on capital. Large pharmaceutical companies and large IT companies aggregate startups, and their model for procurement is usually, I'll give you some money up front that is reflective of how much money you invested in the company, and then you earn back your upside. You earn back your gain over time. That model is really important to understand, because that's how your sales are going to be executed more and more frequently. So if you think of your company is going to be acquired, think about what that supply chain will look like. And then the last point is due diligence requires global expertise as we go forward. I want to relate to you in my closing notes the linkage and parallels I can see in working in mid-Michigan. This is the fastest declining cities in the United States. Our core area, we live in Saginaw, Michigan, which you see is one of the top 10 worst cities in America. Flint, Michigan is the next city neighboring us. And yet we produced what the Global Angel Capital Association saw as the top deal of the year on a global basis 2 years ago. So when we say you're in Russia and you don't compare with Singapore, or we can't keep up with the Bay Area in California, it doesn't mean that there aren't a lot of opportunities to stay busy with on our own. I think with that, I'll end and we'll have a dialogue.
Yeah. Thanks, Kennet. На самом деле я был.
Effectively, I visited Narvik, where the company is. It's not a simple region for the states, I would say it. It's a university city, but however, there are plenty of things of interest. Alexey, I wanted to ask you, was it your first investment abroad? No, it was my second investment. The first one was in software company in the imaging area, and there they find it difficult to develop. It's very difficult, challenging business. It's very hard. What you can do in terms of technology is it to sell, because it's difficult to sell in service. But as a trade-off, you understand that you have a product, and product risks are standard zero. And here we did a very risky thing, much less risky than Ken did when he invested money for an idea and for a person. But his return of an investment was 600 times over in a matter of 3 years. It was a unique example in the States. It was the best case of venture investment. In our case, the return was somewhat lower, but We went to a partners conference in San Francisco. We canvassed some company, we met his company, we liked him. As Ken correctly put it, at that time we had a person with the core knowledge. He lived in London. He looked at that, he said, it's an excellent technology. We started to examine that and we entered the deal. We're very happy. We believe we learned a lot. We learned a lot by understanding that how we used to assess a deal will not work here. I was happy that I was in the office of the company after the deal was consummated. If I found myself there earlier, I wouldn't enter the deal, I wouldn't go with that. In Russian terms, it's a sort of forgotten technopark. There is no marble floors, suspended ceilings. You will not see their beautiful secretaries. A small room, a small chair, table, a PC. There is just one person there. The rest is outsourced. And this company was sold for $500 million US. This is a culture that we should learn, that we should grasp. We don't have it at all. And when a person comes here to this company, he thinks that's just a shell company, but here it appeared to exist for 3 years. The difference is small, but it's remarkable. A few lessons that we draw from this experience: that expert knowledge of the board of directors may give a huge leverage to that person on full-day scheme. Had a good, successful deal. The second deal was a total failure, and the third deal was retrosense. And the United States of America taught us that you shouldn't be afraid of a failure, because after a failure you will have a success. Imagine that in Russia a person failed the deal and lost investors' money. No one would give him any more money. We should learn from that community of people who are there. And it's Michigan, it's not San Diego, it's not Boston, where there are hundreds of such deals. There are just scores of these deals, but anyway, much more than across the entire Russia. We're happy to be involved there. We continue communications, and we hope that the company will be okay. And at the end of my brief presentation, I would like to say, first, it's the first time that we publicly announce the size of the deal, $550 million US. Second, today, for the first time, we say that even on those dosages, in those gene treatment, totally blind people started to see light. And thirdly, we say that for the first time, we like to work together, and we hope that we'll continue working jointly. We are meeting Ken at RVC tomorrow. We are trying to think of a new project. Thank you, and we must move to other cases. Before we move to other cases, I will ask a question to both of you. How do you see it from the size of Ken? Because a Russian company comes with foreign participation, and how it looked from your side, how you worked together, how you sold this drug. It's a very intensive process. I will explain how it looked from our side. Retrosune Therapeutics found it very difficult to raise money, and many large-scale venture funds refused to supply funds. Practically no one believed that it will work. A genie from algae transplanted into human being, and we'll see. Will he see or not? No, you can tell the story in a circus. Well, after the seals make a show. No. Secondly, strictly speaking, if we look at sales, we were a minority partner. We didn't participate in that. These were Ken's network, Ken Gallagher also, That's an investor from San Diego, and it's a unique, huge work done by the entire company. Uh, it's a real American cowboy. He just came to work to the office and worked 24 hours. A very modest person, an excellent professional doing his business. When you have a data room of high quality in a cloud, the buyer understands that he is not dealing with nonsense, but with really good stuff, with real medicine. That was the work. As for sales, it was for the work of a number of members of the board. It's not mine function. You understand that it will be useful to handle that from Russia. Thank you very much. I must add one thing. Our friends from OC, we talked about that with Ken yesterday. On a regular basis, they organize what is called the Foresight Fleet. Well, they put together different people and carry them on somewhere on a steamer, and there is no telecom link there. And the first proposal was made after we came to a place on a steamer where there is no communications. I had to climb the mast to catch some band, because therefore the first proposal was not very good. It's very important to understand the culture of your board of directors, because they put down on paper their rights, their duties, etc. The culture of a good startup are taken in consensus. All members of the board of directors should be happy with the deal. Not all of us were happy. We thought that the price was low. We thought that the company has enough money to move forward and to raise money. And well, I was one of the members of the board. Well, that we need to take a second proposal, which a second offer, which we cannot be refused. It adds interest to the story. Any more questions? Questions to Alexey or to Ken? No? What do you mean by saying that the second partner worked hard? It means that he went to his office and worked like a devil. We have two categories of people here in Russia. 90% will go to the office and make a presentation, and 10% of they just work. That 10% don't have enough time to make presentations. With people who do a lot of talking, there are much more of them, but there are, well, luckily, more people who work rather than talk. I'm sorry, I don't hear what he is saying. Okay, we'll have a separate talk in the lobby after you. We'll be talking for half an hour with you separately. After the Pfizer deal failed, Allergan started actively to acquire different companies to take over, and they bought RetroSense, and after that they acquired the company with colleagues. It's one of Rosnano funds. They bought it for a huge amount of money, but there was a deal made at a later stage, something like $2 billion US. Several Russian funds benefited from Pfizer not buying Allergan. Why? If this is ophthalmology, why Allergat, not ICOM? Were there at least a certain number of options?
Was a like the only investor, the only
Okay.
possible deal?
This is a very important idea that for anybody in life sciences or in a field that needs U.S. marketplace access, you need the FDA regs are very, very defining of how the entire industry works. And what we are seeing is that 5 years ago, life science deals were acquired in phase 3s. Today, there is so much money awash in pharmaceuticals. These global companies have so much to spend, and they don't develop much on their own. They acquire, they buy their technology. So it's definitely a seller's market. And in that context, we had probably a half dozen possible suitors. So when Alexey said the board turned down, we could have sold it 6 months earlier and would have gotten half as much money. So there was a lot of interest from, I shouldn't name names, but from top 10 global pharmaceuticals were interested. And the test today, I think, is as soon as you go through phase 1, phase 1/2A stage, you've proven you're safe in human trials. Then big pharma is ready to pick up and take hold. I'll give you a real story in the field, though, what happens when you're as small as we were, because they really do have huge repercussions. Do you remember the Ebola outbreak in the United States? We had a patient released from the hospital after coming in and self-diagnosing and said, I just got back from Africa, I believe I have Ebola. They released him into the community. The nurse, one of the staff people, contracted Ebola from poor garment handling. The disposal of the dress and gowns was inadequate. The Health Safety Board for Southern Texas, where we were doing our clinical work, all of a sudden had a new directive that said you have to have garment disposal protocols. What's a garment disposal protocol? And I think if we had our own staff, we would have tried to figure that out ourselves. By having no one to do it, we had to go out and find somebody in the market who was uniquely expert on garment disposal. And that saved us months and probably millions of dollars.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Okay, это был прекрасный пример, как...
It was an excellent example of how Russian ventures entered a deal 11 months ahead of a sales to a big strategic investor. Now we're going to talk how to exit and when to exit. Among the audience, who has used the Get taxi services in the recent months? It's impressive. Then Anton and Inshutin will discuss with you the story of investment in Get.
Я для начала, наверное, может быть...
For the beginning, I would ask you to kind of mentally move to 2012 to see how different the taxi market was when we were making the decision to invest in Get. You probably remember that in Moscow, and probably it's hard for you to even remember that, but back then there was a lot of gypsy cabs that were driving broken, dilapidated cars, and you even had to negotiate with them how much it will cost you to go from A to B, and you had to have just exact amount of money that they were asking for, because usually they didn't have change. So therefore you had to show them the directions, in order to get where you want to get. So this market over 5 years, it changed colossally, because such companies as Get, as Yandex Cab, as Uber, they completely changed the market. So what we saw in Get when for the first time we looked at the company, well, firstly, we analyzed the market, and we saw that from a financial point of view, there was a huge market. Globally, it's $200 million. I'm talking about Russia. It's about $2 billion, and for Russia it was $7 billion, and the market was very fragmented, and there was a lot of cab services. There were hundreds of them, and they had different pricing and different approaches to quality of the cars that they used. And there was really like a zoo. And it was clear that the market, because it was so fragmented, it was very good for aggregation model and marketplace. Get initially chose the model of aggregation. This is an approach with the single pricing, the single approach to quality, and Yandex went on the model of marketplace when you could choose from the number of taxi cab pools that with different pricing, but then they came up with the aggregation model. Then later we also saw that the company has a very good product. We liked it, and with geolocation you can see how the car is moving to you. Press one button, you can get the car. At this point it was a revolution, and I remember that Uber was just emerging, and I think it was doing Series B at this point, about $300 million. Now it's more than $60 billion value of the company. And I think that we also looked at the team. We liked those entrepreneurs, Dave Weiser and Roy Moore, the entrepreneurs from Israel. Back then it was the third company they launched, and one of them they sold, they exited that company, the other company. And also it took us a while to agree on the terms of the deal. The value was quite high for us. We were entering at 65 million. Because we were taking it from two Western funds, we had to overpay a little bit, but we agreed that about public ratchet that was tied to a certain performance of the company, and luckily it worked for us, and the valuation went down to 50 million. It allowed us to earn some. Since then, as of today, it grew 50 folds, and with the turnover, it's a big business, global business. Besides its presence in Russia, in Israel, in the UK, and all over the country, in 25 cities, in New York. And now the company is looking at other markets where it will develop its capabilities. And since then, the company, after our investment, the company has new shareholders. First, we helped the company to raise money from Baron Vostok Fund and from Vostok New Ventures. This is a former Vostok Nafta Fund. It was around for $120 million. And with the Morgan Stanley colleagues of mine, we helped them to close that round. And we also helped the company in terms of working with the regulator. Particularly in Moscow, there was an idea to introduce token system, the same system that exists in New York or Istanbul. We see the token system, how it works in Istanbul and in New York, where we studied the market very well. And we know that the system has lots of drawbacks, but finally it would worsen the quality of service for the customers. And we managed, I think, to persuade Moscow authorities not to do it. We also help the company with introductions with B2B clients. Lots of legal companies, banks. Those companies we had connections with, we helped them to get those clients as their customers. It was the first company, Get was the first company that started working very actively with B2B market. And also, we helped the company in some matters that had to do with HR, with recruitment. In terms of new shareholders, as I said, we helped to bring Baron Vostok and Vostok New Ventures. And then later, the company made a big round with Volkswagen for $300 million. It was a little less than a year ago. And a bit later, investors were joined by Sberbank that gave, besides equity investment, they also get venture loan for the company. So at the point when Volkswagen was investing, it was a possibility for the investors to partially sell it. And we had three options. We could either not to sell, or we could sell a very small share, or we could sell more than anybody else, more than any other investors, and quite significant stock of our package in the company, and we lost our spot in the board of directors. So keeping all our informational rights, we decided to sacrifice our spot in the board of directors and to sell the significant share. We sold about $20 million, our share in the company, and we did a partial exit. So we returned the money that we invested in the company, and we have quite a significant package in the company, about 9%. As of today, the company is thinking about next round of investments. By the middle of the year or by September, they will do it. Possibly we will have an opportunity to sell some other shares of ours. Thank you very much. I think it's quite an interesting example of how you hold this stick, so to speak, for both ends. You know, on one hand, you earn well and keep the profit. As round investment, it becomes every next round the risk is growing. And on the other hand, you kind of stay with the company till the victory. It's quite an interesting story, and it vividly shows us those dilemmas that each investor has on the exit. So any questions? No, microphone, please. Anton, if I understand it correctly, on the slide on round C, you were able to invest more, and you added more investment. So why you needed it? Because of the conditions, because of the terms? So why you didn't want to invest more right away? So our fund exposure was quite big. That's why we could not increase it. So that small amount that from the C that came to the company, it was converted debt that were given to the company earlier as a pre-round, and it was converted during the round. More questions? Yes, please. You know, I didn't even know that in such a global service there are Russian investors. It's quite an interesting story. So when we were entering, what was the valuation of the company when you were entering it? It was $65 million. It was the valuation. So you were not founding investor. So yeah, we were coming as BTB. But the round that you're talking about, so this is when you had 1 billion, right? Yes. So in other words, for you it was 15-fold you grow. A little less, but a little less because the previous round a little bit, diminished it. May I ask a question to Ken, as for with the previous deal?
Percent of the deal value was essentially an earnout.
Correct.
Did you try to kind of secure that earnout in any way?
Yeah, we did, and we were able to shape them, I think, pretty. The company was flexible with us. Allergan in the acquisition team is doing almost all its deals with realistic, with milestones, and we try to insist that they're realistic. So it's. They are consistent with what we would have pursued as our milestones. They didn't change target. Mm-hmm. But it is a little frightening to think, are they going to try to take advantage of us somehow? what we saw when we started to look back at it is that if we went that route on our own, each one of those milestones, we'd succeed, and then we'd have to take a year off to go raise more capital. Hit a milestone, raise capital, and it's that, I think, is the time and challenge we continued to face in raising capital that made it so attractive.
Thank you.
Okay. Когда многие из вас
Many of you, when you're sitting in restaurants and you don't know that backstage this restaurant is managed by software ICO, and here at our panel we have two people who sold it and the one who bought it. And I think it's quite an interesting story. And let's start with Denis Cherkasov. So why did you decide to sell it? And then we'll ask Konstantin why he decided to buy it. So let's listen to the story. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. We were selling it for two reasons. First one, and the key reason, at that stage, our understanding of the development strategy of the company stopped matching the strategy of our founders and other shareholders. The second reason was institutional. We were making the decision to close the fund, and the fund was closed today, and we had to exit, and we thought it was the right moment from every perspective to offer our exit from the company. So that's briefly. But behind that, there was a whole story going on that would be great to write a book about. In the investment novel, maybe in a story, there were a lot of dramatic turns, moments, emotions, excitement. It was really, really cool. When you said all that, so there's going to be a question, so tell us more, because it's very interesting. So whom you address the question, to me or to Konstantin? Both. Again, if one sold and the other bought, so if both of you are smiling, it's very interesting to listen to you. So what was going on there? So listen, let me kind of bring the discussion on the next level. So our logic to persuade them was that everybody has to develop on the edge of their competences. So this is how you grow. You have to be on the edge. In other words, I'm a big fan of strategy of Walmart that was opening every next store 50 miles away of its previous store. I don't believe in those stories of leaps, of quantum leaps from the first world to the third world, otherwise, or you're like Lee Kuan Yew, and the company you manage is Singapore. So if you don't match these two conditions, so almost immediately, almost for sure, you can't grow at the expense of developing something uniquely new. And on the one hand, you have a lack of knowledge. On the other hand, you have very high competition. Maybe lack of knowledge and the lack of competition will allow you to grow. Because we know companies, Amber Brands, Finnish company, it is a world leader in producing sporting equipment. Suunta watch, Salomon ski brand, Atomic, great brands that we all use who does sports. And before that company was selling cigarettes. It was the leading Finnish cigarette dealer. And another, for example, Nokia was selling tires. This is when you don't have competition, when you're the only one in Finland and you have a lot of money and you can try somewhere else. But if you have competition in your local market and in the market where you want to leap to, then probably you need to think, is it worth making this leap of faith? You have just to reasonably assess the risks. It doesn't mean that we are right, but this is a question. This is a matter of properly assessing the risk, and it's a great example why one kind of people buy and other people sell. One people are ready to sell the asset, the others are ready to buy the asset, and actually that happens because of a different evaluation of risks. And the difference in evaluating the risks is because of the different understanding of horizon of investment. If your horizon is 100 years and you're going to pass it on to your grandchildren, so of course you can risk. And this is one story. If your horizon is a few years, then it's a completely different idea of risks. Why I'm saying this? Because those bright minds who work in the company as in the board of directors on both sides of the deal, the bright minds were agreeing between each other, but the objective circumstances were that the players were, according to the theory of game theory, so they have a different understanding of risks, and that's why they differently evaluated the situation. And because of the difference of potentials, this is how you get the electricity. And in our case, caused a great deal, and I think all parties are very satisfied with this, and we are very satisfied with this, and I think that our partners that we have very good relationship, I think they're very satisfied with this too, and this is a question to Konstantin, I think.
You correctly put it, there is a difference of opinion which makes all commerce run. Let's listen to your perspective on that. Thank you, Denis. It's very difficult to add something to the previous statement. Really, we bought a bigger stake which was offered for sale by SBVK. I would say first and foremost about the difference of the planning horizons. Our fund has some more years to run to close deals, and we thought that the stake that can accumulate will bring over the allocated time some more money. But yes, we act on the assumption that the company will continue to grow, that organic growth is okay over the past period. We think that there is an opportunity for a certain breakthrough. Well, watch the news media at our next conference. Will be able to say more about that. It's okay if I'm not inviting you not to our... I want to ask a question to Denis Cherkasov. For such structure like Sberbank Venture Capital, sometimes don't you have an idea to switch to evergreen structure? If you see a company which has a potential, which has an upside potential, and with the power of Sberbank behind you, don't you have this idea? Yes, that's what you say is quite reasonable, that we managed not Sberbank's money in that deal. No, we managed the funds of Tatarstan Venture Fund that were a limited horizon, and the life of this fund was limited to 7 years. There were some extensions. The 10 is 10 years now, and our investors, our stakeholders, wanted to close the fund as soon as possible to cash in the profits that were on its books. And for corporate net, it's quite correct. Yes, there should be evergreen funds. May I ask a question, Alexey? I have two questions, actually. The first one, when we met several years ago discussing several options for cooperation, we considered investment only in fintech. Question number one, is it still on your agenda or not? And my second question, do I understand correctly that is a service for booking a table in a restaurant? Well, probably there are some investors at the seed stage who earn some money on that, because normally angels invest in such things. Do you know anyone of this kind in Russia? I start with the second question. We talk about of an ERP system. When a waiter takes your order, you see that he goes to a monitor in the hall and presses some button. Whatever button he pushes appears in the kitchen at the chef's monitor, and the chef prepares a dish. Automatically, the system allocates the relevant amount of food products, food ingredients from your store. In advanced version, is linked to one as accounting software. In the most advanced systems, it will flashes his card, and you know the arrival and living time of a waiter. It can automatically control music and the degree of lighting in your restaurant, and in some more advanced options, it can order and procure food on its own and even compare what people are eating in the neighboring restaurants. It's an automatic tool, and it's a major contribution of founders with the help of investors, including Konstantin and your humble servant. The system became number one or number two in this market. Before that was Airkeeper company and brand Airkeeper in Russia. In the world and global and other kinds of macros. Macros bought out all competition somewhat earlier. And the company has the potential to go to international markets, to go international, but this potential should be realized first. On your first question, yes, it's not on our agenda anymore about investing in some other industries outside of fintech. Actually, we were not very much interested in that. Once Troika Bank was acquired, we thought about what we were going to do with the venture entity. But following the strategy of developing on the boundaries of our competences, Sberbank can easily realize and develop expertise in fintech area. Sberbank does it better than anyone else in this country, and they're one of the most successful companies in this respect in the world. We are dealing with investment which is not classified in the fintech, and we're not going to come back to fintech. Thank you. Any questions? Denis? To Konstantin regarding Ike? Ken? Yes?
Interest in investing in Food Junkie. That's one of our current portfolio companies we'll have to share with you. That's
No, I'm afraid not from these funds.
okay.
However, we can ping the project to someone else among our network.
Okay, теперь
Now, I will invite Konstantin to discuss a deal, a very peculiar deal, because we cannot tell you what is sold in this case. You'll have to make guesses and your own theories. But it's interesting because for the first time we touched upon some technical matters which before that did not exist in this market or were not present on a big scale. Konstantin will disclose you as far as can. I will apologize from the very start that really we cannot tell you a lot of things here, because really this conference was at the stage of preparation for some time. We hope that by the time the of the conference will be able to disclose all detail. However, there are some more days before the deal is closed. Really, we cannot talk about a deal as such. We don't just to say two things which would be of interest to professionals in this room. Anton has already mentioned how wretched worked in the Get Taxi deal. The result was so ambitious and the growth was so rapid, while in the deal that we're talking about and that we cannot disclose to you, the valuations of the company were very ambitious, and in the deal structure there were major ratchets which unfortunately were triggered because the plan was not fulfilled to then. The plan which we put together when we invested in this company. The result is interesting. The result is interesting and important for us. And the result is that ratchets worked and were executed in a deal which was made completely in line with the Russian laws. We believe that effectively, based on the law on limited liability company based on the participants' agreements, we're able to implement the scheme of interaction between investors and founders of the company, which is normally done in foreign jurisdictions. Normally people say that Russian laws are not very suitable for this purpose, but the fact is here we structured such a system of relations which allow us to make a deal in compliance with the law. This is our first achievement, a major one. We cannot discuss it publicly, but the fact is there, it works. And we believe that it's a major achievement, as I said. The second story, it is also very important for professional investors and companies. There we faced an unexpected problem on a deal which may be of interest to many market players, because the company that we're selling is a Skolkovo resident, and due diligence that was performed by the buyer, a big international company, assisted by a company from the Big Four, pointed to the buyer about significant tax implications in case if the Skolkovo resident status is revoked. And basically all our contradictions and objections led us to the understanding of the situation where, at least in this current year, it is not able to prove that the resident status will not be revoked this year, which triggers a tax refund requirement. The beneficial tax grows up. That is, the company as a Skolkovo resident enjoys some tax benefits. They have to be repaid. These are quite big amounts, and there is a significant financial exposure, which resulted in an additional round of commercial negotiations. We are not going to lose in terms of price, but we had to supply additional warranties. I call your attention to the fact that from the side of Skolkovo we weren't able to supply a document which unambiguously will point that the company has been audited and its status is valid at least for a certain date. But indeed, it's a major issue for interaction of development institutions, And probably we need to find a solution to this predicament, because other speakers and people from the floor should pay attention to this problem. Let's try to resolve it on the spot. Are there any people from Skolkovo? Vasily was here, but he left. I think what is important here is to put this item on the agenda. All those who invest and who have in their portfolio Skolkovo residents, I guess there is a variety of, let's say, overlapping deals. I think that we should work together on that. We need a solution to this issue, and then due diligence will identify this problem, and we will be losing, in some cases, money, in some cases, times. It's important for investment community. This is an issue which can be easily resolved, but it needs to be resolved.
Can I just compliment you on that work? It's very valuable. We forget that the returns to the investor are after tax. And
Я прошу прощения, мне нужен перевод, извините, пожалуйста.
I was just complimenting, saying it's valuable to be paying attention to after-tax returns. That is a big issue for us when we dealt with international investments.
Тебя поздравляют.
Okay,
Замечательная сделка.
Не, он говорит, что очень важно, что вы обращаете внимание на доходность после налогов. И, ну, я добавлю, что это, я думаю, что Сколково.
I also would like to add that Skolkovo is very much interested that the residents would be bought and the companies that invest in them that could make a proper exit. And it's important that you understood that. And I think that they will try to find a proper solution that would be valid for many investors. I would like to ask about a question about ratchet in Russian law. There were certain changes in the legislation about a year ago, last summer, if I'm not mistaken. And the question is to all the panelists, but to you particularly, what do you think? Deals in Russian legislation, are they going to be done within the Russian jurisdiction, or it's not time yet? Maybe I can begin with it. So with our fund, there are certain restrictions in terms of jurisdiction where we can invest. In some cases, we had to do structurization, and where international part should be included, like British law. But we think the majority of issues that made us to structure everything in the British law, this is where you can make deals in the style that international investors are used to. The same could be done in the Russian legislation. I think that many issues are covered, but I think that probably the challenge with not enough court practice, but I think it will come with time and experience. Alexey, I look at you and I see this skeptical look in your face. So we're preparing a deal that we can't really talk about much, that will be done within the Russian jurisdiction. The many issues are covered, but not all of them. For example, one of them, the issue that has to do with options, with option programs. So it's not clear how to do it. We have to do it through different instruments. The issue of converted loans, it's another one. It's a whole layer of issues, and our curators from RVC came to me and they asked me not to say that I'm a nerd anymore, but this has to be discussed with professionals, and professionals would say that not issues are covered yet. I can see that there are many questions on the floor. So I already introduced myself. I'm business broker. I work in the market of acquisition and mergers, small and medium-sized business. I was studying this issue for a while. These amendments were introduced in the law for small deals, especially when it's a Russian investor. Everything is possible. And I would also add here that there was another risk that I learned from notaries, that there is big risk that your secured payment may burn in some not trustworthy bank. So you have to plan. Some things can just disappear within 2 years. I would like to apologize. My neighbor from the left, he represents a very solid bank, so you need to use proper banks. So now I would like to ask a question to Anton, and I support that. So such services as Get Taxi and similar ones, Uber or Yandex Cab, they use a disruptive technology model. So what is your vision of prospects in this particular service? Is someone is going to cover the whole market, or they will somehow will be in the market together, or maybe similar models can be used in other industries? Thank you very much for your question. I think that in reality the market will consolidate gradually because prices will go down, and with self-driving cars there will be convergence between the markets of car sharing and cab market that will drop the prices even more in this segment. So I think the consolidation is inevitable, like in many other industries with high competition. But at the same time, as you see, besides Get, Yandex or Uber, they face quite strong competition from the domestic players. And I think those ones, they will be existing together and maybe forming some alliances, and now they're working on it. At least many large companies like Get, they signed a roaming alliance, and the customers may use other services, similar services. Talking about other segments, we like the aggregation model, a marketplace. That's why we're looking for such companies. And another investment that we have in transport company Bus4, it's also a marketplace. This company sells tickets, bus tickets online. They build GTS, global distribution system, to keep ticket inventory for buses, because in Russia the remote system is very archaic. You can't really hook to it, and they had to create a system of inventory and to plug transportation companies to it, and to create system of ticket inventory, so the transportation companies could manage those ticket inventory. And use an OTA model, online travel agent, they're selling tickets online. This company just recently raised round investment from two leading private equity funds. They raised $20 million, and potentially this is another unicorn in our portfolio, and I think this company will be valued to billions of dollars. Thank you. I have two questions to Konstantin about the deal that we can't ask you about, but please. So on which legislation? So how did you choose the country, that the jurisdiction that the deal will be within? I would like to apologize. What legislation of which country you chose for your deal? Or I'm saying something wrong. We had a discussion at the stage of entry, Initially, in this deal, we had a co-investor, and he demanded English jurisdiction, and we are preparing the deal in British law with the international lawyer. But then the investor decided that liquidity is more important for them, and they left, and we stayed alone in this deal. And at this point, we made a decision that everything that we need to do can be structured in Russia. And back then, we made this decision. So now, selling, so we have certain documents that were signed in international jurisdiction of the deal. And further on, because it's limited liability companies according to the Russian law, it is sold as limited liability companies as it's written in the law. We will go to the notary, both buyers and sellers. We show the documents and we sign the deal. Thank you. And the next question to Konstantin, if you let me, from a short comment about losing the Skolkovo resident status and the lack of tax benefits, and there is a requirement to repay the tax. So the question is it possible that German Graf, the president of Sberbank, is it possible for him to go to the government and to kind of fix the issue? Well, firstly, we're talking about different deals and different portfolios of our company. The companies that were in the same board of directors with Denis, and it was a good project. This is ICA company. We're still working together in this story. We're planning our exit, but this is not the deal that you can't ask the question about. The deal we cannot talk about, this is the deal with a different portfolio company, and the collision is there might be some issues that can be fixed on the high personal level, but now we're saying that in our opinion there was quite an important element of the system that we identified. So that's a good idea, by the way. Let him call and fix the issue. It wouldn't be too much, I think. I think everybody wants that when you have such lacunas or like a drawback in the process, it wouldn't be it's bad to call the government and to ask the government to fix it just on an individual basis. No, I don't think it's the right thing to do. So my question is to Denis. If I heard it properly, in the previous deal, the owner of the money that invested in the project initially, that was the government of Tatarstan, Republic of Tatarstan. Yes. One of the shareholders was Tatarstan, yes, a big shareholder, one of the biggest shareholders. It was Tatarstan Republic as a form of a non-government fund, venture fund of Tatarstan. Yes, thank you. Colleagues, we're approaching the end. We have 5 minutes left, so if the panelists, you have a desire to say something smart, so please do it now. Maybe just go one by one. There is nothing smart left to say, but I would like to say that as Konstantin, we were preparing to talk about another deal that we had. We did it. We were investors, leading investor of in one of the companies, but the round closes not on 27 but on 29. We are planning that we will be able on the 29th we will be able to announce the deal, and I think it's going to be as successful as it was successful with Retro Sounds. it was very interesting stage that we entered the deal. So it's from pre-clinic to clinic stage, and I think it's going to be just as successful as the previous one. So please watch the news, and we will announce about it soon.
Maybe just in my closing comments, what stood out to me is the parallel between our two countries and the issues we're facing in the industry. The question, do I want observation rights or a full seat on the board? We deal with the exact same questions. The founder going a different path than the investors. We deal with the same issues. In looking at an limited liability instrument, the National Science Foundation is trying to work with us in creating a hybridized investment that is neither debt nor equity, but trying to get at some of the same core issues that I think you're addressing. So I'm impressed that how similar the issues and the agendas we face are. I think we could have been at the same conference in San Jose this week and had the same discussions. Thank you.
Ну, я думаю, мы все присоединимся к тому, что
I think we can join everything that Ken said. The industry is global, and the issues that venture investors face here, they're the same as all around the world. And the examples of deals that you saw actually demonstrate that industry in Russia, venture industry in Russia, is pretty mature and sophisticated and knows how to tackle complicated issues with complex financial instruments. And please join me in giving the hand to our panelists for interesting stories. Thank you very much.